System integration strategies, breaking down data silos for seamless digital operations. In this episode, Kramer, founder of Cooperative Computing, shares how smart companies connect their systems to eliminate data silos and create seamless workflows. You'll learn proven integration approaches that work, how to prioritize which systems to connect to first, and why breaking down silos accelerates decision-making and boosts productivity. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl, and whether you're just starting your digital journey or looking to accelerate your existing efforts, it's time to get enabled digitally. So Kramer, let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the business model itself, because once you introduce new choices, the business model has to change.
Yeah, the evolution of business model. So if we step back and think about the components of a business model and the things that actually make up how you achieve the outcomes using that business model, it's important to understand that those business models that you've built today that are built on how you're actually going to produce goods, how you're actually going to distribute those goods, how those goods are going to get serviced and maintained, and how do you make certain that you can continue to create value with those goods in an ever-living cycle. That methodology for how that production in that business model occurs is super critical for you to think about. What does that look like if I have a different, and let me give you an example of this. There is a moment in time in the future where the desire to own a car will change business models. And the need to actually own the car becomes irrelevant. And it is quite, there is an opportunity that a company like Allstate could say, guess what? I'm not going to sell you insurance. I'm going to sell you everything, the vehicle and everything that goes with it. And I'm going to sell it to you in a different business model that lets you have that car, that truck, that vehicle, the car insurance, and all the service that goes with it. And then I've got a business model that will take that car every 3 years, and I'll rotate that to a different buyer every 3 years. And therefore, my business model is going to change, and how I capitalize my company, the revenue I can then generate from that, both from the sale of those cars, so on and so forth. There's a whole different business model that could show up for Allstate. Now, the thought process that goes into how to adopt that business model is super critical. I read an article the other day about, I can't remember if it was Hertz or someone else, they're starting to rapidly adopt their business model to say, guess what? I'm going to be an entity that has 4 revenue streams. And one of those revenue streams is I've got a whole direct to consumer dealer ability, so that once this is done, I just stick it up on my own marketplace through our digital enablement. I make it available to you to get. I do the financing and funding for it because I've already got those capabilities built into how I'm getting the cars anyways. That business model is shifting rapidly, and it's generating a whole new capitalization structure for them that's also going to help them lift who they are in the business market.
Yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling to some degree of how much change needs to happen in business models with everything that's going on. And that can be overwhelming for a lot of businesses. And I think that's a path that people need to stop, think, take a breath, realize what the implications of some of these things are. And as you say, that's the whole principle of getting enabled digitally, is that it allows you to cope with all of those things. But talk me through a little bit about the businesses, some of the businesses you've dealt with, where that realization comes to play and saying, right, we're now giving more choices. We've accepted that that's where we want to go, but now the business has to change.
Yeah. There's kind of 2 or 3 things that we see, especially with those folks that are in the adopter circle, right? Because the innovators have already made a choice and they've already started pounding out, the 90-hour work week to get that choice to happen. But the adopters start to come in and they start looking around going, hey, this is a whole different way of thinking about things. And, to your point about how do you as a business start to think through what that looks like for my business, there's this core construct that we call a hyper focused approach to how you run the business to unify it. Because you can't keep a siloed organization and adopt a digital enablement strategy that lets you accelerate into the automated economy. It functionally won't work. As you look through the ones that are doing it and they win, that's not how they operate. Now, number one, they're hyper focused on their customer. That gets back to that first principle. I want what I want when I want it, and I want it at the value I want it. But number two, that hyper focused approach understands that, and we use a circle rather than pillars. And why do we use a circle? Because you must interconnect in a unified methodology all the way around this circle. And this circle has 5 key segments. Okay. The first one is the ability to be the best you can be at branding and marketing. And you have to digitally enable that branding and marketing. The second one is sales and commerce. The third one is operations and order fulfillment. The fourth one is customer engagement. And the fifth one is service delivery management. Now, if you follow that around the circle, if you're really good at branding and marketing, it's going to drive the execution of sales and commerce. If that goes well, that's going to push things down into your operations and order fulfillment. And if that goes well, that's going to push you to re-engage your customer to buy again. And if that goes well, you have to have some way to govern and deliver those services around that circle. Those 5 key segments are crucial for business leaders to think about in their organization differently. How do they unify the approach to go across those segments? And the 4 key principles you have to think about, because digital enablement is not a tech thing only. Digital enablement is the organization that does it. And how do you digitally enable an organization? How do you think about digital enablement for an organization? If innovation doesn't become the center of your people's belief system, and that's not easy to make as a change, because if I'm a welder that's out on the line and I'm spot welding 15,000 units a month, he's got to think differently about innovation. And how does he do that? And how does he bring that back into the company and doesn't get laughed out that that guy working on the spot welding machine had an amazing idea? The company has to adopt that, right? So organization, methods and procedures, how do we do the work we're doing? Systems and technology, what am I using to use it? And it's all about digital enablement. Don't rip out and replace, just keep adopting things that make you drive, and then key performance indicators and metrics. The way you actually see and make decisions happen in a hyper automated fashion. Those 5 keys business segments have to start to become the lifeblood of how everyone thinks about the business, how they collaborate and coordinate together, how do they do things as they're building that business out. There is a storm of conversation around business models that are run by 5 people and they're billion-dollar companies. And
Wow.
that 5-person billion-dollar company, it's just as important for them to understand those business segments. How are they going to deliver it? How do they make certain that they've got governance and service management around it, as it is if you've got a 10,000 person company that's a billion-dollar business. So the 5 key segments, those 4 principles being overlaid across those segments is super crucial.
And I think it's important as well to understand that there is this idea that you're creating these choices as we spoke about previously, and they're being driven by a buyer market, and then you have to go through all of this process. But there's also intertwined with all of that, the communication process is super critical, isn't it? Because the innovation to enable digitally can happen from other areas of the business if there's enough communication.
Yeah, that method for how you actually govern and adopt that change, what we call service delivery management, is important to put in a lightweight framework really early and then tighten that up as you need or expand that as you need. As you think about the key things that are being done inside a business to survive and thrive, and it's being done at every corner and nook and cranny of that business, the communication methodologies for how that gets um, what I'm going to say concentrated across the mindset of all the players that have to play is super critical. And the methodologies for doing that, that organizational change management and how it gets moved up and down throughout the organization is crucial.
How do you eliminate the idea that people feel threatened by change? Because that's a big obstacle for most organizations, that any kind of change, particularly when you talk about the evolution of a business work model itself,
Yes.
drives that frustration and that fear that can happen within some of the teams.
Well, there's kind of there's we call them two crosshairs. So the thing about change is it's got kind of some key constructs that make it frustrating for the people dealing with it. One thing about change is it's different than what I'm doing that I've learned to do that makes what I do repeatable. And whether I'm lazy and I don't want to do it a different way, or whether I'm um, fruitious and I want to make certain I'm doing what I need to do as eloquently as I can, when things change, the ability to adopt that and do so in a method that makes me feel valued and makes the company feel that the value I'm creating is important, right? That's one aspect of change that is very, um, I'm going to call it, it creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the person that is going to have to adopt it. The reality is, every business is seeking to become more profitable than they were yesterday. And the two biggest costs inside a business are typically the employee cost and the materials that they're actually getting to actually make the products that they're producing. And then the third one is usually the cost of manufacturing, the equipment that you have to go produce it with. And when you look across the change that happens in the elements that the human beings are doing, we're fearful because it's going to be different than what I'm doing. I'm going to underperform, or I'm going to be eliminated altogether because the thing that's coming in is trying to make it so my company's more profitable, and therefore I cannot do that job anymore. Now, the principles that we talked about that have been forever, one of those principles is this new business model creation out of the change. And there's a lot of information out there and data that shows no matter what we do. In fact, I was reading an article the other day that said every blue collar job is going to be replaced by AI. And I thought that was funny. I was thinking about that. And so I went and pulled a list. I worked for a company that we build out job descriptions, and we'd build out a bunch of job descriptions. I said, let me go look at all these blue collar jobs. And what does that mean by they're all going to be replaced by AI? If we think about the work that we do on a day to day basis and what's going to change about the work that we do, we should be leaning in as workers to be a part of the innovation driver. And our culture should be adopting that innovation driver mentality into a place that we are less fearful about the change and more fearful that we are not the executors and the drivers of the change. That's number one. That's the first X, is how do we get you to be a driver of the change? For example, it is true that if the intralogistics robotic systems work really well, that the forklift operators inside a typical distribution center should go down drastically. And let's say you're operating 10 forklifts. And so there are 10 forklift drivers that are working 2 shifts. So that's 20 forklift drivers. And those 20 forklift drivers start to go, oh my God, I see this robotic system coming in. My job is going to change. I'm going to be eliminated. I think the 2 components that are super critical. One, how about you get yourself into a position to be the guy that's the robotics operator? Because there's going to be a bunch of those jobs, because these things still need managed, supervised, they need overlooked. But the people that are going to have to manage them. So that first X is, how do you be the driver of change rather than change driving you? You've got to start to get that inside the corporate culture and a part of the corporate culture. The second piece of change that often freaks us out, and the thing that is the toughest for us to overcome quite early stages when change start to happen, is the construct that the change wasn't invented by me, and therefore my adoption of that change is being done to me. Now that leads to the first one a little bit, but here's the main difference. If you are a person that is understanding that they're building another DC, another distribution center, and it's going to be totally robotic, it doesn't impact me. That thing's going in, it's going to produce a bunch of throughput, it's going to have high value. You know, someone told me it was going to cost them $300 million to build, and it didn't cost $300 million to build this one. We'll see how that works out, so on and so forth. That construct that it's not being done to me, so I'm going to ignore it, is the harder one to overcome, because it sneaks up on you versus the one that's staring you in the face saying it's coming at you. And so that's the second construct that we quite often have to deal with inside that's the second X, right? The first X, it's coming at you. The second X, it's being done around you. You're not looking up, and you don't understand the writing on the wall. There is no limit of the number of jobs that are going to be necessary in the new world. Someone's still got to repair the robots. Someone's still got to make certain that those robots are effective. There's a bunch of things that are going to have to happen, and the people who have to work on those things are going to need to be people that can shift their thinking from where I'm at today to where I need to be tomorrow to overcome the effect of that. And we call that upskilling and cross-skilling. And there are just so many. There is a job right now where you have to go look at data. You have to classify that data. And there are tools built around this so that you can help enable the AI to be more elegant in what it knows and understands. That job didn't exist 10 years ago. That job pays really well. Is it going to get automated at some point? It will, but if you're thinking about the next phase of that. And how do I operate in the next phase? So a direct answer, there's 2 X's. The first X is being done to me. The second X is it's being done around me. How do you take the crosshairs of that X and enable your organization, enable yourself to not be caught in the crosshairs of those 2 X's and be able to adopt the change that's coming?
And that's all for this episode of Get Enabled Digitally with Kramer from Cooperative Computing. If you found value in today's conversation about digital enablement, please subscribe and share with colleagues navigating their own transformation journey. For more insights on accelerating into the automated economy, check our show notes for resources and contact information. This show has been produced by podcastdoneforyou.online. I'm Anthony Pearl, and until next time, keep moving forward to get enabled digitally.